The sun hung low over the quiet village, painting the horizon in shades of orange and gold. Nuru leaned against the wooden fence surrounding the sheep pen, twirling a blade of grass between his fingers. He was supposed to be watching the flock grazing on the far hill, but the job was boring, as always. The only sounds were the bleating of sheep and the occasional rustle of wind in the grass. "I hate this," Nuru muttered to himself. "Why do I always have to watch the sheep? Why not Keto or Musa? They never have to stand out here all day." His older brothers always got the exciting tasks, helping in the fields, going to the market, or fixing the family's fishing nets. But Nuru, being the youngest, was stuck with the sheep. Suddenly, an idea sparked in his mind. A mischievous grin spread across his face. "Maybe I can make things a little more exciting," he said to himself. Nuru cupped his hands around his mouth and shouted, "Wolf! Wolf! There's a wolf attacking the sheep." His voice carried across the field and into the village. Within seconds, the peaceful air turned chaotic. Men grabbed their spears, women rushed to gather children, and everyone hurried toward the hill where Nuru stood. A group of villagers, led by Keto, charged up the hill, their faces filled with worry. "Where is it, Nuru?" Keto demanded, panting. Nuru pointed toward the grazing sheep, struggling to keep a straight face. It ran into the forest when it saw me," he stammered. The villagers searched the area but found no wolf. Slowly, they began to realize what had happened. "You're lying, aren't you?" Keto glared at his younger brother. Nuru couldn't hold it in any longer. He burst out laughing. "You should have seen your faces. You all looked so scared." The villagers muttered angrily among themselves. "This isn't funny, boy," one elder scolded. "We left our work and ran here because we thought you needed help. Don't waste our time again." Nuru shrugged, still grinning. It was just a joke. A few days later, Nuru found himself alone with the sheep again. The hours dragged on, and boredom once again consumed him. What if I did it again, he wondered aloud. Just to see if they'll fall for it. Without thinking twice, Nuru shouted, "Wolf! Wolf! There's a wolf!" Once again, the villagers dropped everything and rushed to the hill. Spears in hand, they searched high and low, their frustration growing when no wolf appeared. "This is the second time, Nuru," Keto shouted, his face red with anger. "If you do this again, no one will come to help you." But Nuru only smirked, enjoying the attention. That night, as Nuru lay in bed, the villagers' angry faces flashed in his mind. "They are so serious all the time," he thought. "They don't know how to have fun." The next day, he went back to the hill with the sheep. The morning passed uneventfully, but as the sun climbed higher, something moved in the distance. At first, Nuru thought it was the wind stirring the tall grass. But then he saw it, a dark, sleek shape slipping through the trees at the edge of the forest. His heart skipped a beat. It was a wolf. Its yellow eyes gleamed as it crept closer to the flock. The sheep bleated nervously, sensing the predator. Nuru's hands began to shake. "Wolf," he screamed. "Wolf! Somebody help!" But the village was quiet. No one came running. Nuru screamed again, louder this time, "Wolf! Please, someone help me!" But the village remained silent. The people had grown tired of his lies. The wolf, a large, scruffy beast with sharp teeth and hungry eyes, moved closer to the flock. Nuru's heart pounded as the sheep huddled together, bleating in fear. He grabbed a stick lying nearby, but it felt small and useless in his trembling hands. "Stay away!" Nuru shouted, waving the stick wildly. The wolf didn't flinch. Instead, it growled low, its yellow eyes fixed on one of the lambs. The sheep panicked, scattering in all directions. Nuru ran to block the wolf, but it lunged forward with terrifying speed, snapping at a lamb's leg. "No!" Nuru yelled, striking the wolf's side with the stick. The wolf let go of the lamb, but instead of retreating, it turned its attention to Nuru. The wolf crouched, ready to pounce. Nuru's legs felt like they were made of stone, but he forced himself to stand his ground. He swung the stick again, shouting as loud as he could, hoping anyone would hear him. The wolf leapt, and Nuru barely dodged its snapping jaws. He stumbled backward, falling to the ground. The stick slipped from his hand, rolling out of reach. The wolf stood over him, growling deep in its throat. Nuru closed his eyes, bracing for the worst. Suddenly, a loud voice echoed across the hill. "Get away from him." Nuru opened his eyes to see Keto, his older brother, charging up the hill with a spear in hand. Behind him were several other villagers, armed and ready. They had heard Nuru's desperate cries and decided to check, just in case. The wolf, outnumbered, snarled and darted back into the forest. The villagers chased it until it disappeared into the shadows. Nuru sat on the ground, shaking with relief. Keto knelt beside him, checking for injuries. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice softer than Nuru expected. Nuru shook his head. "I'm fine," he whispered. The other villagers gathered around, their faces a mix of concern and frustration. Elder Kofi, who had come with the group, stepped forward and spoke sternly. "Nuru, do you see what your lies have caused? If we hadn't decided to check this time, you could have been killed, and so could the sheep." Nuru hung his head in shame, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely audible. "I thought it was just a game. I didn't know it could be this serious." Elder Kofi placed a hand on Nuru's shoulder. "A lie may seem small at first, but it can grow into something dangerous. Trust is not something you should throw away so carelessly. You've learned a hard lesson today, and I hope it stays with you." From that day forward, Nuru was different. He took his duties seriously, watching over the sheep with care. The villagers were slow to forgive him, but over time, they saw his effort and began to trust him again. Though Nuru never forgot the day the wolf came, he was grateful for the second chance to prove himself.